There's a type of person who can delete you from their life like you never existed. No grief, no guilt, just silence. One day they're there, texting you, laughing with you, making you feel like you finally found someone who gets you. And then the next day, nothing. No dramatic fight, no tearful goodbye, just a slow fade into absolute nothing, like you were a chapter they finished and shelved without a second thought. And the most disturbing part, most of them don't even know what's broken inside them. You've met this person. Maybe you love this person. Maybe you're still trying to make sense of why someone who looked you in the eyes and said you matter to me could vanish so completely, so cleanly, without a single visible scratch. And somewhere in the wreckage of that confusion, you started wondering if the problem was you, if you were too much, too needy, too emotional. Let me stop you right there, because that story, the one where their detachment is your fault, is the most dangerous lie this situation produces. So today, we're going under the surface. We're going to talk about what is actually happening inside the mind of someone who disconnects this easily. And I promise you, it is not what the internet has been romanticizing. Let's start with the brain, because this is where the real story lives. Your brain, every human brain, is biologically engineered for attachment. This is not poetry. This is neuroscience. When you form a genuine bond with someone, your brain literally rewires itself around that person. Neural pathways deepen. Oxytocin floods your system. The other person becomes threaded into your sense of identity, your daily rhythm, your vision of the future. This is why losing someone doesn't just hurt emotionally. It feels like surgery without anesthesia, like part of your actual self has been carved out. That pain is not weakness. That pain is the biological receipt for a real connection. It is proof that something true existed. So when someone walks away from that, from you, and feels almost nothing, you need to understand what that actually means. It doesn't mean they were stronger. It doesn't mean they were more evolved. It means their nervous system learned, somewhere along the way, to treat connection as a threat. And a nervous system that's been trained to fear closeness will do the most logical thing any threatened system does. It shuts down access entirely. John Bowlby spent decades mapping how early relationships shape our capacity to bond as adults. And what he and researcher Mary Ainsworth discovered should make every single one of us pause. There is an attachment style, they called it avoidant, that doesn't form from strength or wisdom or philosophical clarity. It forms from neglect, from emotional abandonment, from being a small child who reached out for comfort, for warmth, for someone to say, "I see you, you're safe," and getting nothing back. Or worse, getting pushed away. That child's brain does something quietly devastating. It begins suppressing the attachment need itself, not processing it, not healing it, suppressing it, burying it so deep, so efficiently, that by adulthood, the person genuinely believes they don't need deep connection. They wear their independence like a badge of honor. They talk about not being clingy, like it's a personality trait to be proud of. They frame their inability to grieve as emotional maturity. But underneath all of that, there is a child who stopped asking to be held because no one ever came. And that child never actually left. They just learned to go very, very quiet. Here's where it stops being sad and starts being something you need to protect yourself from. Because these people don't stay isolated. They don't recognize what's missing inside them and politely remove themselves from the dating pool. They move through other people's lives, through your life, and they leave a specific kind of damage that takes years to name. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The way they show up at the beginning, fully, magnetically, with an intensity that feels like finally being truly seen. You think you found someone rare, someone real. So you open up, you invest, you let your guard down in ways you haven't in years. And for a while, it feels like everything you were hoping for. But then, the temperature drops, slowly enough that you almost convince yourself you're imagining it. They're still physically present, but something essential has dimmed. And when you gather the courage to say something, when you sit across from them with your heart in your hands and ask, "Are we okay?" they look at you with genuine confusion. Not cruelty, confusion. Because to them, nothing changed. And that is the most gut-wrenching part of this entire dynamic. They are not lying. They truly do not understand why you're bleeding, because they were never fully there to begin with. You were loving someone who was emotionally checked out before you even finished your first conversation. Researchers have a clinical term for this. They call it emotional unavailability, but that phrase is far too gentle for what it actually feels like on the receiving end. What it actually feels like is invisible. What it actually feels like is that you handed someone the most honest version of yourself, and they held it briefly, decided it was too heavy, and set it down without ceremony, and then had the audacity to act unbothered about it. Now, I want to speak directly to anyone watching this who just felt a cold recognition in their chest. Not because someone did this to you, but because you know quietly that you are this person. You've been called cold, distant, hard to reach. Maybe you've ended things that mattered and shocked yourself with how fast you recovered. Maybe you've told yourself that's just your personality, that you're simply built differently, that you need more space than most, that your self-sufficiency is a feature, not a flaw. I'm not going to attack you, but I am going to tell you something that might be the most useful thing anyone has ever said to you. What you have been calling peace, that flat, unbothered calm, when everyone around you is feeling the weight of a loss, is not peace. Peace is something you arrive at after feeling the feeling. What you have is more likely numbness, and numbness is not the absence of pain. It is pain that has been running so long underground that it no longer recognizes itself. The avoidant person does not escape grief. They collect it silently in places they cannot consciously access. And it always surfaces, not as sadness, but as emptiness, as a vague, persistent sense that something is missing that they can never quite locate, as a pattern of connection that always seems to stop just before it becomes real. That is not freedom. That is a prison with extremely good interior design. The most radical, difficult, countercultural thing a person like this can do is not detach more efficiently. It is to stay, to feel the discomfort of being fully known by another person and not run, to sit with grief instead of stepping over it, to let loss actually land instead of rerouting around it before it can touch you. Because here is what nobody is saying loudly enough. The capacity to be genuinely moved by losing someone is not a vulnerability. It is the proof that you are actually present. It is the evidence of a life fully lived with other human beings, not around them. You do not need to delete your feelings to survive this world. You need to learn that feelings will not delete you. That is the whole lesson. That is the entire journey. And it is harder, messier, and infinitely more worthwhile than any clean, silent exit you have ever made. If this hits somewhere specific, Drop it in the comments. I want to know if you've been on the receiving end of this kind of disappearing act, or whether somewhere in this video you recognize the pattern in yourself. Both conversations matter. Both deserve to be had out loud. And if nobody in your life is willing to have them with you, well, that's exactly why you're here. Stick around.